Rain hammered the windows of Rossi's Prime like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry. Inside, the smell of garlic butter and seared ribeye hung thick in the air, and Alina Rodriguez wiped down table 7 for the third time that hour. Her hands didn't shake from fear. They shook because she'd worked a double shift on 4 hours of sleep, and her feet felt like they were standing on broken glass. 23 years old. Finance degree gathering dust in a drawer. $53,000 in family debt that grew teeth every time the phone rang. This was not the life she'd planned. The front door opened with a gust of wet wind, and the entire restaurant went quiet. Not library quiet, funeral quiet. The kind of silence that comes when everyone suddenly remembers they have something urgent to look at on their plates. 6 men in tailored black suits walked in like they owned the oxygen in the room. Maybe they did. The man in front didn't rush. Didn't need to. His presence moved ahead of him like a warning. Vincenzo De Luca. Even Alina knew the name. Everyone in this part of the city did. You didn't need to read the papers to understand what he was. You just needed to watch how grown men looked at the floor when he passed. Her manager Giovanni appeared at her elbow, face pale as pasta dough. Table 12, he whispered. Take their order. Don't ask questions. Don't make eye contact for too long. And for God's sake, Alina, don't mess this up. She grabbed her notepad and walked over on autopilot. The table of 6 had arranged themselves like chess pieces around their king. Vincenzo sat in the center, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair combed back, eyes the color of cold espresso. He didn't look at her when she approached. He was reading the menu like it contained the secrets of the universe. Would you have answered him or stayed silent? Let me know in the comments. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Good evening, gentlemen. Can I start you off with drinks? Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Orders went around the table. Whiskey, scotch, wine, the usual expensive things that came with expensive problems. Then Vincenzo looked up. His eyes pinned her in place. Not threatening. Worse. Curious. You. His voice was smooth as aged leather. You look tired. Long shift, sir. You work here full time? For now. For now. He leaned back, a smile playing at his lips. His men exchanged glances. And what do you do when you're not serving men, like me, overpriced steaks? I figure out how to pay off debt that isn't mine. One of his men coughed. Another shifted in his seat. You didn't talk to Vincenzo De Luca like that. Everyone knew it. But Alina was too tired to remember fear. Vincenzo's smile widened. Debt. The family curse. Tell me, little waitress, since you're so honest tonight. He gestured around the table like he was presenting her to an audience. What would you do if I gave you, say, $10,000 right now? As a joke. What's your financial advice? The table chuckled. It was a game to them. Mock the poor girl. Watch her stumble. Alina looked him dead in the eye. I'd invested in 3 small businesses on the edge of failing. A mechanic shop, a catering company, and a coding startup. High risk, high reward. Diversified enough that if one tanks, the other 2 keep you afloat. Within 6 months, you triple your money if you picked right. Within a year, you'd own a network. The chuckling stopped. The rain kept falling. Vincenzo De Luca stopped smiling. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers steepled under his chin. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Say that again, he said quietly. Her words had silenced a table full of men who feared no one. And for the first time that night, the dawn looked like someone had finally said something worth listening to. The envelope arrived 3 days later. Alina found it tucked under her apartment door at 2 in the morning when she dragged herself home from another double shift. Plain white. Expensive paper. The kind that whispered money before you even opened it. Inside, a check for $10,000. No note. Just a signature at the bottom that looked like it cost more than her entire year's rent. Vincenzo De Luca. She sat on her kitchen floor, still in her uniform that smelled like grease and desperation, staring at those zeros like they might disappear if she blinked. Her hands trembled, this time not from exhaustion, from possibility. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Cash it or burn it. Your choice. You have 48 hours. That was it. No explanation. No strings outlined in neat little rows. Just a test wrapped in 10,000 reasons to either run or prove herself right. Sleep didn't come that night. Neither did answers. She paced her tiny apartment, the check burning a hole in her pocket. Every time she looked at it, she saw her mother's face. The way her mom's hand shook when she opened bills. The way her father had died, still drowning in debt he'd taken on to save a business that didn't love him back. Would you risk everything to prove your point? Drop a comment if you would. Her laptop screen glowed blue in the darkness. She pulled up spreadsheets, market trends, business failure rates in the city. The mechanic shop on 42nd that kept fixing cars for people who couldn't pay. The catering company run by a widow who made food that tasted like somebody's grandmother had poured love into every dish. The kid, barely 20, coding apps in his parents' basement because no investor would touch him. All three were drowning. All three just needed someone to believe in them before the water closed over their heads. Dawn broke through her window like an accusation. She hadn't moved from her laptop. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. But the numbers didn't lie. This could work, or it could bury her. She thought about playing it safe, paying down her family's debt, buying herself 6 months of breathing room, 6 months of not waking up to threatening calls and her mother's quiet crying through thin walls. But safe hadn't gotten her here. Safe had gotten her a finance degree and a waitress apron. Safe was just another word for slow death. Her pen hovered over the check. One signature to cash it. One decision to change everything or lose it all. The thing about rock bottom is that it makes you brave. Or stupid. Sometimes both. She grabbed her phone and made 3 calls before the sun fully rose. The mechanic answered on the first ring, voice thick with sleep and suspicion. The caterer picked up on the 4th, hope creeping into her hello. The coder's mom answered, said her son was already awake, always was, working on dreams nobody funded. Alina split the money 3 ways in her mind. $3,333 each. Not enough to save them. Just enough to prove what they could become. If this was a trap, she'd walk into it with her head held high. By sunrise, she'd made her choice. The bank opened at 9. She'd be there at 8:59. And by noon, 3 businesses would get a second chance they didn't know was coming. She texted the unknown number back. Just 2 words. Watch me. Her phone buzzed immediately. I already am. By sunrise, she'd already chosen where to invest. And somewhere across the city, a man who feared nothing smiled at his phone like he'd just found the most dangerous thing in the world. Someone who wasn't afraid of him. The mechanic's name was Ray Torres. 62 years old, hand-stained permanent black from 40 years under hoods. When Alina walked into his shop with a check, he looked at her like she was selling him a prayer he'd stopped believing in. What's the catch? His voice scraped out rough as sandpaper. No catch. Just don't waste it. He didn't. Within 2 weeks, Ray bought the equipment he'd been renting. Started taking jobs he'd been turning down. Word spread fast in neighborhoods like theirs. Honest mechanic. Fair prices. Suddenly people were lining up. The caterer, Maria Gonzalez, cried when Alina handed her the money. Bought fresh ingredients instead of day-old discounts. Her food started showing up at events that mattered. Weddings. Corporate lunches. Places where people with money ate and remembered names. The coder, Danny Chun, didn't cry. He just stared at the check like he was afraid to touch it. Then he locked himself in that basement for 72 hours straight and emerged with an app that solved the problem nobody knew they had until they saw it. 3 long shots. 3 heartbeats away from flatline. And then they lived. Alina watched it happen from the outside, still serving steaks to people who didn't look at her face. But at night, she tracked every dollar, every transaction, every small miracle blooming from dirt she'd watered with someone else's money. If you're still watching, you're hooked. Hit like so YouTube knows you're part of this story. She didn't hear from Vincenzo for 6 weeks. Then one Tuesday, a black car pulled up outside Rossi's Prime at closing time. The window rolled down. Same cold espresso, eyes watching her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Get in. I'm not getting in your car. Smart girl. Walk then. I'll follow. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks down. Public enough for you. She walked. He followed. True to his word. The coffee shop was nearly empty. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead like anxious insects. Vincenzo sat across from her in a booth that had seen better decades, looking completely out of place in his $5,000 suit. "You actually did it," he said. "No preambid. No small talk. You thought I wouldn't? I thought you'd pay off your debts. Run. Disappear. That's what smart people do when men like me hand them money." "Maybe I'm not smart." He smiled like a man watching his own rules crumble. "Or maybe you're the only smart one in the room. Those 3 businesses? They're already showing profit. Small, but clean. Legal. Nobody's getting hurt. Nobody's getting buried." She sipped her coffee. "Waited. I want to hire you. I have a job. Serving steaks to men who don't deserve them. I'm offering you something different. Manage investments. Clean money. Legal ventures. Help me build something that won't burn down the second the law looks too close." "Why would a man like you want legal?" His jaw tightened. For just a second, something real flickered behind those eyes. "Something tired. Because I'm drowning in dirty money, and I can't remember what it was like to sleep through the night." The words hung between them like a confession in a church neither of them attended. "I'll think about it," she said. He slid a card across the table. "No name. Just a number. Don't think too long. For once, crime is losing, and I need to know if you're brave enough to help me bury it." Then came his message the next morning. Text. Simple. Terrifying. "Meet me tomorrow. Alone." The mansion sat behind gates that looked like they were designed to keep out armies. Maybe they were. Alina stood at the entrance, finger hovering over the intercom button, wondering if this was how people felt before they walked into beautiful disasters. The gates opened before she pressed anything. Someone was watching. The driveway curved through manicure gardens that probably cost more to maintain than her yearly salary. Marble fountains. Stone statues of people who looked important and dead. Everything screamed money, so old it had forgotten where it came from. A man in a suit, not Vincenzo, opened the door before she knocked. "Miss Rodriguez, he's expecting you." Inside was worse. Gold fixtures, crystal chandeliers that threw light like weapons. Art on the walls that she recognized from textbooks. Every surface polished to a shine that reflected nothing but emptiness. This wasn't a home. It was a museum to loneliness. Vincenzo waited in a study lined with books that looked unread. He stood by a window overlooking the city, hands in his pockets, shoulders carrying weight she couldn't see but somehow felt. "You came," he said without turning around. "You sent a car." Seemed rude to waste the gas. He laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was rusty, like he didn't use it often. Comment if you believe power can ever be used for good. He turned to face her. Without his entourage, without the performance, he looked different. Older. More human. Dangerous in a completely different way. "Let me show you what I'm really asking." He opened a laptop. Numbers filled the screen. Accounts. Holdings. Properties. Legitimate businesses buried under layers of blood money, trying to wash itself clean. "I own pieces of this city," he said quietly. "Restaurants. Construction companies. Real estate. Most of it built on foundations I'm not proud of. But I'm tired, Alina. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of wondering which friend will betray me next. Tired of being the monster everyone expects. Then stop being one. It's not that simple. It never is. But simple and possible aren't the same thing." He offered her a glass of wine from a bottle that probably cost more than her car. She shook her head. "I don't drink on a job." "You don't have a job yet." She pulled out her laptop. "Then let me earn it." For the next 2 hours, she dissected his empire on his own desk. Showed him where the clean money could grow, where the dirty money could be phased out, how to build something that wouldn't crumble the second the feds came knocking. He watched her work like a man seeing fire for the first time. "You're not afraid of me," he said finally. "I'm terrified of you. I'm just more afraid of staying stuck." He'd met fearless men, plenty of them, men who'd kill for him, die for him, but never someone who'd challenge him with spreadsheets and a belief that even monsters could choose different. Never a fearless woman who looked at his empire and saw possibility instead of prison. When she finished, she closed her laptop. "I'll do it, but only legal. You backslide, I walk. No warnings. No second chances." He extended his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm. "Final." When she walked out that night, heels clicking on marble that echoed like gunshots, he turned to the two-guard station by the door. His voice dropped low. Absolute. No one touches her. Ever. 6 months changed everything. The mechanic shop expanded into 3 locations. Maria's catering company got contracts with hotels downtown. Danny's app got bought by a tech company for 6 figures, and he immediately started building the next one. But that was just the seed money. Alina took Vincenzo's empire and performed surgery. Cut away the rot. Invested in housing developments that didn't displace families. Education programs that actually taught skills people needed. Charity foundations that did more than launder reputation. The media started noticing. First, small articles. Local business owner investing in community. Then bigger pieces. Profile in the business section. Interview requests. Someone, somewhere, started calling him the Gentleman Don. At first, it was a joke. Mockery. How cute. The mobster wants to play philanthropist. Then the joke stopped being funny because the work was real. Don't forget to subscribe. You won't believe what happens next. Behind closed doors, Vincenzo's obsession grew in ways that had nothing to do with money. Every successful project he credited to her. Every news article he forwarded with one word. You. She worked from a small office he'd set up in one of his legitimate buildings. Glass walls. City view. Everything transparent, which was the point. He visited less than he wanted to. More than he should. The housing project broke ground today, she told him one afternoon, not looking up from her computer. I saw. Media is calling you legitimate now. How does it feel? He sat across from her desk, studying her the way scientists study things they can't explain. Strange. Like wearing someone else's skin. That's because it's yours. You just forgot what it looked like. Every success he credited to her. And every night he hated himself for it. Not because she was wrong. Because she was right. And being right meant he'd been wrong for 20 years. He began to change. Slower than she wanted. Faster than he thought possible. Meetings turned from threats to negotiations. Money moved from fear to investment. The city started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, leopards could change their spots if someone handed them the right mirror. But the world around him didn't change. Old enemies watched. Old friends questioned. The system he'd built his empire on didn't appreciate renovation. Alina fell at first. The way conversations stopped when she entered rooms. How some of Vincenzo's men looked at her, like she was a disease infecting their way of life. One man in particular, Matteo Vero, Vincenzo's oldest associate. The kind of loyal that curdles into poison when threatened. She caught him watching her one evening. Didn't say anything, but his smile was all teeth and no warmth. That night, she texted Vincenzo, "Someone in your circle doesn't like what we're building." His response came fast. "I know. I'm handling it." But handling it meant acknowledging the threat. And someone in that world was watching, waiting to strike. 3 days later, Alina's office was raided. Federal agents. Warrants. Cameras. Her face on every news station by noon. The headline read, "Gentleman Don's financial advisor charged with fraud." Someone had planted evidence so perfect it looked like truth. The cameras flashed like lightning strikes designed to blind. Alina walked out of her office building in handcuffs, federal agents on each side, her face frozen in shock that would be screenshotted and memed by dinner time. The crowd pressed in close. Reporters shouting questions that sounded like accusations. "Miss Rodriguez, did you embezzle funds? Were you working with the Mafia? How much did you steal?" Her lawyer, some guy in a cheap suit the public defender's office assigned that morning, kept saying, "Don't speak, don't react, keep walking." But her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The charges scrolled across news tickers like a death sentence. Guide fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, evidence so airtight it could survive in space. Bank records with her signature. Transfers to offshore accounts she'd never opened. Emails she'd never written discussing payments she'd never authorized. Someone had built an entire false life for her, and it fit like a custom suit designed to suffocate. Ever been framed by someone jealous of your success? Hit the thumbs up if you've seen this story in real life. Her mother called 17 times that first day. Alina couldn't answer. "What do you say?" "Mom, Remember how I told you I was finally making it? Turns out I'm going to prison instead. The apartment felt smaller that night, like the walls were closing in to crush whatever hope she had left. Her phone buzzed with messages from people she thought were friends, all saying some version of "I can't be seen with you right now." Only 3 people reached out with anything real. Ray the mechanic, Maria the caterer, Danny the coder. The 3 she'd invested in first. The 3 who remembered what belief looked like. Their messages all said the same thing. "We know you didn't do this. We're here." Vincenzo didn't call, didn't text, didn't send his expensive lawyers or his powerful connections. Nothing. The silence cut deeper than the charges. She'd been so stupid, thinking a man like him could actually change, that she could transform monsters into philanthropists with spreadsheets and stubborn hope. He'd used her, let her build his legitimacy. And the second she became a liability, he vanished like smoke. Her name echoed on TV screens like a curse she never earned. 3 days of silence. 3 days of her face on every channel. 3 days of prosecutors building a case that would bury her for 15 years minimum. Her court-appointed lawyer looked at the evidence and told her the truth lawyers aren't supposed to say out loud. "You should take a plea deal. This goes to trial, you'll lose." That night, she sat in her apartment with the lights off, staring at her phone, watching her life collapse in real time through news alerts and social media posts about how she was just another criminal who almost got away with it. And the man she trusted didn't call. She thought about her father, how he died, still believing the world was fair if you worked hard enough. How wrong he'd been. How wrong she'd been to follow his example. Maybe monsters didn't change. Maybe they just got better at pretending. Her phone buzzed at 3 in the morning. She almost didn't look. Private number. The message was short, direct. "Don't speak. Just listen." Another buzz. An address. Nothing else. She stared at those 2 messages like they were a test, written in a language she'd forgotten how to read. Every logical bone in her body screamed trap. Setup. Whatever came next would only make things worse. But worse than 15 years in prison? Worse than dying in a cell built by someone else's lies? She grabbed her jacket. The address led to a warehouse in a part of the city where streetlights went to die. The warehouse smelled like old concrete and secrets that didn't want to be found. Alina pushed through the door, expecting anything. Ambush. Arrest. A bullet with her name on it wrapped in poetic justice. Instead, she found Vincenzo sitting alone at a metal table, laptop open, face lit blue in the darkness. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Maybe he hadn't. "You came," he said without looking up. "You disappeared. I was working while my life burned down on national television to find who lit the match." His eyes met hers finally. Something burned there that had nothing to do with the laptop screen. Matteo Vero, my oldest friend. 20 years I trusted him. 20 years he smiled to my face while planning this. He turned the laptop toward her. Screen after screen of evidence. Real evidence. Showing how Matteo had planted false records, forged signatures, created fake accounts in her name, even paid off a federal agent to fast-track the raid. Why? Her voice cracked. She hated that it did. "Because you were changing me. And men like Matteo need men like me to stay exactly what we are. Monsters. Predictable. Controllable." She sank into the chair across from him. All the anger she'd been carrying for 3 days tried to escape at once, but couldn't find the exit. "The gala is tomorrow night," Vincenzo continued. "Every major player in the city will be there. Media, politicians, the people who matter." He pulled up another file. Security footage, financial records, email chains, everything pointing to Matteo like arrows to a target. "I'm going to clear your name. Publicly. In front of everyone. And then what? Matteo just accepts it." His smile was cold as winter. "Matteo won't have a choice." The annual gala was the kind of event where billionaires pretended to care about poverty for one night and called it charity. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, champagne that cost more per bottle than most people made in a month. Alina watched from backstage, wearing a dress Vincenzo's people had delivered that morning. Her hand shook, not from exhaustion this time, from rage. Vincenzo took the stage during the main presentation. Started with his usual speech about community investment and second chances. The crowd applauded politely, already thinking about dessert. Then the screens behind him changed. Bank records appeared. Mateo's name highlighted in red. Transfers showing how he'd embezzled over $2 million over 5 years. How he'd framed Alina to cover his tracks. How he'd paid off officials to make it all disappear. The crowd gasped as numbers appeared on the screen. Proof of innocence for her. Proof of guilt for him. Mateo's face drained of color. He stood from his table, mouth opening to protest, but Vincenzo's security was already moving. Matteo Vero. Vincenzo's voice filled the ballroom like Judgment Day. You tried to destroy an innocent woman to hide your crimes. You betrayed me. You betrayed this family. And now everyone knows. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. Within minutes, it would be everywhere. The real story. The truth that mattered. Federal agents entered from the side doors. Real ones this time. With real warrants. Matteo looked at Vincenzo as they cuffed him. You'll regret this. You don't throw away 20 years for some waitress. Vincenzo leaned in close, voice dropping to a whisper that somehow Alina heard from across the room. She was never just a waitress. And you were never really my friend. The next day, Matteo Vero vanished without a trace. The charges against him stuck. But the man himself? Gone. Some said witness protection. Others said Vincenzo's old methods made one final appearance. Nobody asked too many questions. In their world, some answers weren't meant to be found. The morning after the gala, Alina found Vincenzo in his study, staring at the same window he'd been looking through the first time she visited. Like he was searching for something in that city view he'd never quite find. Thank you, she said from the doorway. You shouldn't have to thank someone for the truth. But I do, because you risked everything to give it to me. He turned to face her. The exhaustion in his eyes went deeper than sleepless nights. It was the kind of tired that came from carrying weight for so long you forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. I need to tell you something, she said. Stepped into the room. Closed the door. This can't continue. What we've built, it's beautiful, but it's not enough. What do you mean? You're changing, Vincenzo. Really changing. But you're trying to do it while still holding on to the man you used to be. And that's impossible. You can't serve two masters. You can't be both the Don and the philanthropist. Eventually, you have to choose. His jaw tightened. You're asking me to give up my power. I'm asking you to choose your freedom. Sometimes letting go is the truest love. Comment if you agree. The silence between them stretched like a bridge neither wanted to cross. Everything I am is tied to this life, he said quietly. My name, my reputation. My family built this empire over 3 generations. You're asking me to walk away from blood. I'm asking you to stop drowning in it. He wanted to argue. She could see it in his face. But the words wouldn't come because deep down, he knew she was right. What if I don't know how to be anything else? Then you learn. The same way I learned that being underestimated doesn't mean being powerless. The same way Ray learned his shop could grow. The same way Maria learned her food could feed more than just poor neighborhoods. The same way Danny learned someone would believe in him. Tears threatened at the corners of his eyes. She'd never seen him cry. Wasn't sure he remembered how. I can't ask you to stay, he said finally. Not in this world. Not while I'm still figuring out how to leave it. I know, but I can fund your dream. Let you build something real. Something that helps people the way you help me. She'd already decided. 3 sleepless nights had given her clarity she didn't want but needed anyway. I'm starting a foundation. For people like me. People stuck between poverty and potential. I'll invest in the ones everyone else overlooks. How much do you need? Nothing from you. Not yet. I need to build this myself first. Prove it works without your name attached. He wanted to ask her to stay. She could feel it in the air between them. But leaders like him don't beg. And women like her don't wait for permission. She walked to the door. Stopped. Turned back one last time. You saved me twice, Vincenzo. Once with money. Once with truth. Now save yourself. Because the world needs more reformed monsters than it needs perfect saints. Her silhouette disappeared into morning light. His penance began. But years later, her foundation would receive a familiar envelope. No return address. Just a check with more zeros than seemed possible. And in the memo line, 2 words, keep going. 5 years can change everything if you let it. Alina's foundation, Power Restores, operated out of a converted warehouse in the same neighborhood where she'd serve steaks to people who never learned her name. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd started small, $10,000 of her own money, the same amount Vincenzo had once given her as a joke. Invested it the same way. 3 businesses on the edge of dying. Then 6 businesses. Then 12. Word spread the way truth always does when it's wrapped in results instead of promises. Students who couldn't afford college got microloans for trade schools. Single parents got startup capital for home businesses. Immigrants got language classes and legal help, and someone who looked them in the eye and said your dreams matter here. The foundation grew because Alina remembered what it felt like to be drowning with everyone watching from the shore. Every year, an anonymous donation arrived. Always the same day. Always substantial. Always with the same 2-word memo. She never asked who sent it. Some questions were better left unanswered. Ray's mechanic shops had grown to 7 locations across 3 states. Maria's catering company employed 40 people and had a waiting list 6 months long. Danny had sold 2 more apps and now taught coding to kids in the same basement where he'd built his first dream. They all sat on the foundation's board, voted on who received funding, shared their stories with new applicants to prove that the edge of failing wasn't the edge of finished. One afternoon, Alina visited the community center the foundation had built. Paint still fresh. Computers donated by Danny's company. Kitchen equipment from Maria's warehouse. Tools from Ray's shops. A mural covered the main wall, painted by local artists. The words stretched 15 feet high. Power Restores. She smiled at those words. They meant something different now than they did 5 years ago. Power didn't have to corrupt. Sometimes it could heal. Across the city, in a neighborhood where houses cost more than most people made in a lifetime, an older man walked alone. No bodyguards, no entourage, just another face in the crowd. Vincenzo De Luca had disappeared from public life 3 years earlier. Sold his remaining holdings. Dissolved his organizations. Walked away from the empire his grandfather had built with blood. The media called it retirement. His former associates called it weakness. The federal prosecutors called it convenient. He called it survival. Some days, he visited the community center, stood in the back during events, watched the lives being rebuilt with money he'd earned tearing other lives down, watched the woman he'd loved from a distance continue the work he'd been too broken to finish. He smiled at the mural that read Power Restores. No one recognized him. That was his freedom, the kind you can't buy, only earned through years of choosing different. But one final act would tie their names forever. One last envelope to deliver. One last choice to make that would determine if redemption was real or just another word for running away. He pulled out his phone, typed a message he'd written and deleted 100 times over 3 years. I'm ready, if you'll have me. Sent it to a number he'd kept but never called. Waited for a response that would either complete his transformation or prove that some stains don't wash clean no matter how hard you scrub. The scholarship gala happened once a year. Alina's favorite night, when students who'd been given second chances stood on stage and told stories about futures that almost didn't exist. 300 people packed the community center. Donors, recipients, families. The kind of crowd that proved hope wasn't just poetry. It was math. Investment plus belief equals transformation. Alina stood backstage, reviewing her speech, when her phone buzzed. Message from a number she'd kept saved for 5 years, but hadn't heard from in 3. I'm here. Back row. Don't react. Just listen when the time comes. Her heart jumped. She scanned the crowd through the curtain gap. Found him in the back corner. Older, grayer, thinner, wearing a simple suit that didn't announce itself. He looked like someone who'd learned how to disappear and found peace in it. The event rolled forward. Students spoke. Parents cried. Ray, Maria, and Danny each presented awards to new recipients. The room hummed with the kind of joy that makes you believe the world might actually be fixable. Then came a final speech. Alina's moment to close out the night. She walked on stage, notes in hand, heart hammering. Started with the usual thank yous. The statistics about lives changed. The plans for expansion. Then she deviated from the script. 5 years ago, someone gave me $10,000 as a joke. To mock me. To watch me fail. But I took that joke and turned it into this. She gestured around the room. Everything you see tonight started because someone underestimated me. And I decided being underestimated was the greatest gift anyone could give. The crowd applauded. She waited for silence. But I didn't do this alone. Every person here has a story about someone who believed in them first, who saw potential in the wreckage, who invested not just money, but faith. She looked directly at Vincenzo. He sat perfectly still. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones who needed saving themselves. Sometimes redemption isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing different. Every single day, even when it costs everything. Midway through her closing remarks, an older man in the back row stood up, moved toward the aisle. People glanced his way. Then he collapsed. The room erupted. Chairs scraping. Voices shouting. Someone call 911. Give him space. Is there a doctor? Alina jumped off stage, pushed through the crowd, reached him just as he looked up at her with eyes that had seen too much and somehow still chose hope. Vincenzo. Her voice broke. He smiled, weak, fading, but real. His hand moved to his jacket pocket. She reached in, found an envelope. Of course, there was an envelope. There was always an envelope with him. Read it later, he whispered. Not here. Paramedics arrived. They worked fast, professional, got him on a stretcher. She rode in the ambulance, holding his hand while machines beeped urgency. At the hospital, doctors said heart attack. Severe. He'd known. Had been living on borrowed time for months. Made peace with it, apparently. Signed DNRs, arranged everything. He died 3 hours later. Quiet. Clean. The way people who've lived loud lives rarely get to go. Alina sat in the waiting room, numb, holding the envelope. Opened it with shaking hands. Inside, legal documents, deeds, titles, corporate papers. Every legitimate business he'd built or bought or transformed. Every property, every investment. All of it signed over to the Power Restores Foundation. His entire empire, given to her cause. The last page was a handwritten letter. Alina, you asked me once to choose between power and freedom. I chose freedom. But that doesn't mean the power has to die. Use it better than I did. Build things I never had the courage to build. Save people I never knew how to save. You call me a reform monster. Maybe. But you're the reason the monster remembered he used to be a man. Thank you for the joke that saved my life. Even if it couldn't save my heart. Vincenzo. Tears fell. Not for the Don he was, but for the man he became. The waitress had outlived the king and inherited everything he'd spent his last years trying to deserve. 6 months later, Power Restores announced the largest expansion in its history. New centers in 12 cities. Scholarships for 5,000 students. Microloans for 800 businesses. At the press conference, reporters asked where the funding came from. Alina smiled. From a man who learned that the best way to wash blood money clean is to grow flowers in it. The headline read, Gentleman Don's final gift, Empire of Redemption. He once gave her a joke. She turned it into justice. And that's how a waitress changed an empire. If this story moved you, hit like and share it with someone who's been underestimated. Leave a comment about a time someone believed in you when no one else would. Your story might inspire someone scrolling through right now who needs to hear they're not alone. And subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because we've got more stories coming about quiet justice, second chances, and people who refuse to stay in the boxes the world built for them. Don't miss the next one. See you in the comments. Let's build something together.